The stagecoach lurched to a stop, wheels groaning against frozen mud. Clara Miles gripped her worn leather satchel and stepped down onto the hard-packed earth of Dustville's Main Street. The December wind cut through her traveling cloak like a blade, but she'd felt colder winds in Pennsylvania, at least here. The air didn't carry the smell of her father's sickbed or the lawyer's cologne when he'd explained why the farm would go to her cousin Samuel instead of her. She straightened her shoulders, all 6 feet of her, and surveyed the town that would be her new home. Dustville sprawled before her like a collection of weathered wooden boxes dropped carelessly along a dirt road. The general store leaned slightly to the left, as if exhausted by the weight of its false front. Next to it, a saloon exhaled tobacco smoke and laughter into the gray afternoon. Further down, she could make out a blacksmith shop, a boarding house with peeling paint, and what might have been a church or a schoolhouse. It was hard to tell from where she stood. The other passengers had already scattered, leaving her alone beside the coach. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, hauled her trunk down from the roof and dropped it unceremoniously at her feet. "That's the last of it, miss," he said, already climbing back to his perch. "You got someone meeting you." "My cousin," Clara said. "Howard Brewster. He runs the feed store." The driver's expression shifted. Just slightly, a flicker of something pity, maybe, or surprise. "Brewster, hey. Well, his place is down that way, past the bank. Can't miss it." He gathered the reins. "Good luck to you, miss." The coach rolled away, leaving Clara standing in the street with her trunk and satchel. Snow began to fall, fat, lazy flakes that stuck to her dark hair where it escaped from beneath her bonnet. She bent to grab the leather handle of her trunk, her back protesting after 3 days of jostling on hard seats, and began to drag it down the street. People watched her from doorways and windows. She could feel their eyes tracking her progress, taking in her height, her broad shoulders, the way she hauled her own trunk without waiting for assistance. A cluster of women outside the millinery shop stopped their conversation to stare. Clara kept her gaze forward, her father's voice echoing in her memory. "Stand tall, girl. You've got nothing to be ashamed of." The feed store sat squat and unwelcoming at the far end of the main street. "Brewster's Feed and Grain," the sign proclaimed in peeling letters. Through the dusty window, she could see sacks of grain stacked like fortress walls. The door stood slightly ajar despite the cold. Clara paused on the threshold, set down her trunk, and smoothed her skirts. She'd worn her best dress for this arrival, brown wool with black trim. Practical but respectable. Her mother's cameo brooch sat at her throat. She looked, she hoped, like a woman ready to work, ready to prove herself useful. The door creaked when she pushed it open. "Howard." The store smelled of oats and molasses, dust and burlap. A thin man emerged from behind a tower of grain sacks, wiping his hands on a stained apron. He had the Brewster nose, sharp and disapproving, but none of her father's warmth in his eyes. "Clara." He said her name like it was something unpleasant he'd found stuck to his shoe. His gaze traveled up, and his frown deepened. "Good Lord, you're even taller than your letter suggested." "Hello, Howard." She kept her voice steady. "Pleasant. Thank you for—" "No." He shook his head, backing away as if her height was contagious. "No, this won't do at all. I told your father I could use help with the books, maybe some mending. I didn't expect—" He gestured vaguely at all of her. "This. I'm a hard worker." Clara said, "I can do the books. Yes, but I can also lift grain sacks, help with deliveries, whatever you need. On the farm, That's exactly the problem." Howard's voice rose, thin and sharp. "This is a respectable establishment. I have a reputation to maintain. The wives of my customers shop here. What will they think if I have some Amazon hefting grain sacks like a man? Women are meant to be in the home, doing women's work, not this." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the cold. "I need work. Howard, you promised my father." I promised a dying man I'd help his daughter. Yes, but I expected a normal woman. Someone who could help Martha with the house. Maybe mind the store while I'm at lunch. Not someone who looks like she could wrestle a bull. He shook his head again, more violently. It's unnatural. You're unnatural. The word hit her like a physical blow. She'd heard it before. Whispered behind hands at church socials. Hissed by boys in the schoolyard. But never from family. Never from someone who was supposed to help her. I have nowhere else to go, she said quietly. That's not my problem. Howard turned away, busying himself with a ledger. There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Hartley might have a room. Beyond that, he shrugged. Maybe you should have thought of that before you came all this way, looking like that. Clara stood frozen for a moment, her hands clenched in her skirts. Through the window, she could see the snow falling harder now, already beginning to dust the street white. Her trunk sat outside like an accusation. I see. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Thank you for making your position clear. Cousin. She turned and walked out, her back rigid, her head high. She would not let him see her shoulders shake. She would not let him see anything but the straight line of her spine as she left. Outside? She bent to grab her trunk again. Her hands were already turning red with cold. She'd left her gloves in her satchel. As she straightened, she noticed a man leaning against a post outside the saloon across the street. He was watching her, but not the way the others had. His gaze was steady, considering, without the usual mix of surprise and disgust she'd grown accustomed to. He wore the uniform of his trade-worn leather chaps over denim, a coat that had seen too many winters, boots caked with mud and worse. A cowboy, probably in from one of the ranches for supplies. His hat shadowed his face, but she could see he was young, maybe 30, with dark stubble and eyes the color of winter sky. Their gazes met across the street. Clara lifted her chin, ready for the inevitable smirk or jest. Instead, the cowboy touched the brim of his hat, a small gesture. Polite, respectful, the kind of greeting a man might give any woman, regardless of her size. Then he pushed off from the post and disappeared into the saloon, leaving Clara standing in the snow with her trunk, wondering why such a simple gesture made her throat tight. She dragged her trunk toward the boarding house Howard had mentioned, each step taking her further from family and deeper into the unknown. Behind her, she heard the feed store's door slam shut. The boarding house, when she found it, was full. Mrs. Hartley took one look at Clara and shook her head. I run a respectable establishment for ladies, she said, as if Clara's height somehow made her less of one. Perhaps you might try the hotel. The hotel wanted $2 a night, more than Clara could afford for even a week. The restaurant might hire her to wash dishes, the owner said, but not until spring when business picked up. The general store wasn't hiring. The millinery shop owner laughed outright. By the time the sun began to sink behind the mountains, Clara had been turned away from every establishment in Dustwill. Her feet ached, her hands were numb. The snow had soaked through her cloak and dress, chilling her to the bone. She found herself at the edge of town, staring at the river that curved like a frozen snake through the valley. An abandoned freight shed stood near the water, its door hanging askew. It wasn't much, 4 walls and a roof with only a few holes, but it was shelter. Clara dragged her trunk inside and sank down on a dusty crate, finally allowing her shoulders to slump. She'd left Pennsylvania with such hope. Your cousin Howard will take care of you. Her father had wheezed from his deathbed. He's family. He won't turn you away. Clara laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty shed. Family. The word had lost all meaning the moment the lawyer explained that unmarried daughters couldn't inherit, that the farm would go to her male cousin instead. And now this cousin, this Howard who shared her blood, had looked at her like she was a circus curiosity. She opened her satchel and counted her money again. $43.60. It had seemed like a fortune when she left Pennsylvania. Now, With no job and no prospects, it might last her a month if she was careful. Then what? A sound outside made her look up. Footsteps, slow and measured, approaching the shed. Clara's hand went to the small knife she kept in her boot, a gift from her father, who taught her that a woman alone needed to be ready for anything. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by the fading light. The cowboy from the street, still wearing his hat, carrying something in his hands. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was low, careful, like he was approaching a spooked horse. "Saw you come in here. Thought you might need these." He held out a pair of leather gloves. Work gloves, worn but well cared for, lined with rabbit fur. Clara stared at them, then at him, up close. She could see his face better, weathered but not old, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than frowned. He was tall, not as tall as her. Few men were, but he didn't seem bothered by having to look up slightly to meet her eyes. "I don't need charity," she said. "Didn't say you did." He set the gloves on a crate near the door, not coming any closer. "But frozen fingers won't help you prove whatever it is you came here to prove." "How do you know I came to prove anything?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Woman travels alone to a place like Dustwill in December, drags her own trunk through town after being turned out by kin. She's either running from something or running to something. Either way, she's got something to prove." Clara studied him, this strange man who spoke to her like she was just another person, not a curiosity or an aberration. "And what's your name, Cowboy?" "Eli Carter." He touched his hat again. "I work the Jensen spread, about 5 miles north. We come to town every few weeks for supplies." Clara Miles. She didn't offer her hand, he hadn't offered his, but something in the air between them shifted, became less wary. "Well, Miss Miles," Eli said, "those gloves'll be hanging on that nail there if you decide you need them. Cold's supposed to get worse tonight." He turned to go, then paused. "That shed's not much, but it'll keep the wind off. There's a pump out back that hasn't frozen yet, and sometimes the church ladies leave day-old bread on their back step for anyone who needs it. Just so you know." Then he was gone, boots crunching through the snow, leaving Clara alone with a pair of gloves and the first kindness she'd encountered since stepping off the stagecoach. She sat in the gathering dark for a long moment, then reached for the gloves. They were too big, of course, but the rabbit fur was soft and still warm from his hands. She pulled them on and felt, for the first time since arriving in Dustwill, like she might survive this. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the faint sound of cattle lowing. It wasn't home. It might never be home, but it was where she was. And Clara Miles had not come all this way to give up now. She stood, pulled her cloak tighter, and began to unpack her trunk. Tomorrow, she would find a way to earn her keep in this hard place. Tonight, she would make this shed livable. And maybe, just maybe, she would discover why a cowboy named Eli Carter had looked at her and seen something other than an oddity. The gloves smelled of leather and horse and honest work. Clara kept them on as she arranged her few possessions, their warmth a reminder that even in the coldest places, kindness could take root. The first night in the shed taught Clara what cold truly meant. Pennsylvania winters had been harsh, but at least she'd had a proper house, a fireplace, quilts made by her mother's hands. Here, the wind found every gap between the boards, turning the small space into an icebox. She'd layered every piece of clothing she owned and still shivered until dawn. Eli Carter's gloves the only parts of her that stayed warm. Morning came gray and bitter. Ice crystals had formed on the inside walls where her breath had frozen. Clara sat up stiffly, her joints protesting, and forced herself to move. Standing still meant freezing. Her father had taught her that during the winter he'd spent logging in the mountains before she was born. The pump behind the shed worked, as Eli had said, though she had to break a skin of ice with her boot heel. The water was so cold it burned, but she washed her face and hands anyway, then tried to make herself presentable. Her appearance mattered now more than ever. Who would hire a woman who looked like she'd slept in a shed, even if that's exactly what she'd done? The church sat 2 streets over, a modest white building with a bell tower that listed slightly to the left. Clara approached the back steps cautiously, feeling like a thief, even though Eli had said the bread was left for anyone who needed it. Sure enough, a basket sat on the top step, covered with a clean cloth, 3 loaves of bread, only slightly stale, and a small pot of apple butter. She took 1 loaf and a spoonful of the preserves, careful to leave the rest for others. As she turned to go, the back door opened. A woman stood there, middle-aged and wearing a flour-dusted apron. "Oh," the woman's eyes widened as she took in Clara's height. That is, are you new in town?" "Yes, ma'am. Clara Miles. I arrived yesterday." The woman's expression shifted from surprise to something more calculating. "The cousin Howard Brewster was expecting. I heard Martha Brewster mentioned—" "He decided I wasn't suitable," Clara said evenly. "I'm looking for work, if you know of any." "I see." The woman clutched her apron. "Well, the church doesn't. Perhaps you might try Mr. Holloway at the general store." "I did. Thank you for the bread." Clara tucked the loaf under her arm and walked away before the woman could stammer out more polite rejections. The general store was just opening when Clara arrived. Mr. Holloway, a thin man with nervous hands, looked up from his ledger as she entered. "Miss Miles, wasn't it I told you yesterday? I'm not hiring." "I'm not asking for a job today," Clara said. "I'm offering a trade. I can sew and mend. I noticed yesterday that you had a pile of grain sacks with tears. I'll repair them in exchange for supplies." Holloway frowned, but his merchant's instincts won out. "What kind of supplies?" "Thread, needles, a bit of food, nothing extravagant." He considered this, fingers drumming on the counter. 5 sacks for a spool of thread and a needle. 10 for that plus a pound of flour and some salt pork. It was robbery, and they both knew it. Back home, she could have mended 20 sacks in the time he was asking for 10, but Clara wasn't in a position to negotiate. 15 sacks for all that, plus a small bottle of lamp oil and some matches? Deal. Holloway seemed surprised she'd bargained at all. "Sacks are in the back room. You can work there, but I don't want customers seeing you. Bad for business." Clara spent the morning hidden away with the damaged grain sacks, her fingers flying over the coarse burlap. The work was monotonous, but familiar, and there was a certain peace in it. No one stared at her here. No one whispered. She was just hands doing work, earning her keep. By noon, she'd repaired all 15 sacks plus 3 extra. Holloway grudgingly added a small sack of coffee beans to her payment. "Don't expect this to be regular," he warned. "Once these sacks are fixed, that's it." Clara packed her supplies carefully and left through the back door. As instructed, the sun had come out, turning the snow to slush in the streets. She needed to find more work, but first she needed to make the shed more livable. At the riverside, she gathered deadwood for a fire. The shed had no stove, but there was a rusted metal bucket she could use for warmth. It wouldn't be much, but it would be something. As she worked, she noticed movement on the other side of the river. A group of men on horseback, driving cattle toward town. Cowboys from one of the local ranches, probably bringing beef to the butcher. One of the riders broke away from the group and headed toward the bridge, even at a distance. Clara recognized the easy way he sat his horse. Eli Carter crossed the river and rode up to where she stood with her armload of wood. "Miss Miles." He touched his hat brim. The gesture was becoming familiar. "Settling in. After a fashion?" She shifted the wood in her arms. "Thank you for the gloves and the information about the bread." He dismounted, looping his horse's reins around a nearby post. "Let me help with that." I can manage. Didn't say you couldn't. He began picking up larger pieces of wood she'd had to leave behind. Just faster with 2 people. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Clara found herself stealing glances at him. He moved with the economy of someone used to physical work. No wasted motion. His hands were scarred and capable. He didn't try to take the wood from her arms or insist she let him carry everything. Just worked alongside her like an equal. You planning to stay in that shed long? He asked eventually. Until I can afford something better. Could be a while. Work's scarce in winter, especially for... He paused. For women like me, Clara finished. Yes, I'm learning that. I was going to say newcomers, but that too. He added another branch to his pile. You might try the laundry. Mrs. Chen sometimes needs help, and she doesn't much care what her workers look like as long as they show up. Mrs. Chen runs the laundry on the east side of town. Her husband worked the railroad until a rock slide took him. She's been managing alone since, but the work's hard on her hands. Arthritis. Clara filed this information away. You seem to know a lot about the townspeople for someone who lives 5 miles out. A slight smile. I pay attention. Useful habit in my line of work. They carried the wood back to the shed. Eli didn't comment on the shabby shelter. Just helped her stack the wood neatly inside. When they were done, he studied the space with a critical eye. That roof won't hold if we get heavy snow. You'll want to shore up that corner with something. I'll manage, Clara said again. He nodded, accepting this. I brought something else. From his saddlebag, he pulled out a horse blanket, thick and somewhat worn but clean. Ranch has extras. Won't be missed. Clara's pride warred with practicality. Pride lost. Thank you. There's something else. He seemed to choose his words carefully. Some of the boys from the ranch will be in town tonight. Saturday's their night to blow off steam. They're good men, mostly, but liquor can make fools of anyone. Might be best if you... If I stay out of sight. Clara's voice was flat. If you stay careful, Eli corrected. A woman alone is always a target, but a woman alone who looks... Again, that pause. Different. Strong, he said. Some men don't like that. Makes them feel small. Clara looked at him sharply. He was perhaps 3 inches shorter than her, but nothing in his manner suggested he felt diminished by it. Speaking from experience. Speaking from observation. He moved toward his horse. I'll be in town for a few hours yet, if you need anything. I won't. This time his smile was fuller. No, I don't suppose you will. Good day, Miss Miles. He rode away, leaving Clara with a blanket, a pile of firewood, and more kindness than she knew what to do with. She spent the afternoon arranging her shelter, using the bucket to create a small fire, hanging the blanket to block the worst of the drafts. By evening, the shed almost felt like a room instead of a tomb. Mrs. Chen's laundry was exactly where Eli had said, a small building that breathed steam into the cold air. The woman who answered Clara's knock was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with silver streaking her black hair and hands that moved stiffly. I'm looking for work, Clara said without preamble. I was told you might need help. Mrs. Chen looked up at Clara, then up some more. You can lift? Yes. You can scrub. Yes. You can work in heat that makes strong men faint. I can try. Mrs. Chen smiled. Good answer. Most people say yes without thinking. Tomorrow, sunrise, $1 for a full day, but you'll earn it. Water weighs more than grain. Clara left the laundry feeling lighter than she had since arriving. $1 a day wasn't much, but it was work. Honest work. She could survive on that while looking for something better. The streets were beginning to fill with cowboys as she made her way back to the shed. They clustered outside the saloons, loud with laughter and Saturday night freedom. Clara kept her head down, moving quickly, but not so fast as to draw attention. Well, what have we here? 3 men blocked her path. Cowboys, but not from Eli's ranch, she could tell by their gear. Newer and flashier than working cowboys typically wore. The one in front, barely out of his teens, swayed slightly on his feet. "Excuse me." Clara tried to step around them. The boy moved to block her again. "Now that's not friendly. We're just trying to make conversation with the lady." He squinted up at her. "Christ, you're a big one. Aren't you like a damn tree?" His friends laughed. One of them, older and meaner looking, added, "Maybe that's why Brewster kicked her out. Wanted a woman, not a plow horse." Clara's hands clenched in her skirts. She could smell the whiskey on them, see the glitter in their eyes that spoke of young men looking for entertainment. Any reaction would just egg them on. "Let the lady pass." Eli's voice came from behind the cowboys. He stood easy, relaxed, hand nowhere near the gun on his hip, but something in his stance made the 3 men step back. "Just having some fun, Carter," the young one said. "No harm meant." "Then you won't mind moving along." It wasn't a question. The older cowboy sneered. "What's she to you? You always did like them different. Remember that squaw you—" "That's enough. Hank." Eli's voice didn't change, but the temperature seemed to drop. "You boys have drinking to do, don't you?" For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Hank laughed, ugly and knowing. "Sure, Carter, we'll leave you to your lady." He tipped his hat to Clara with mocking courtesy. "Ma'am." They swaggered off, the young one looking back with curious eyes. Clara stood frozen until they turned the corner. "You all right?" Eli asked quietly. "Fine." Her voice came out rougher than intended. "I didn't need rescuing." "Didn't rescue you, just reminded them of their manners." He fell into step beside her as she started walking again. "Hank Bowman's got a mean streak when he drinks. Best to steer clear." They walked in silence until they reached the shed. Clara stopped at the door, turning to face him. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why do you keep helping me? You don't know me. I'm nothing to you." Eli considered this, looking out at the river. "My mother was tall," he said finally. "Not as tall as you, but taller than my father. Taller than most women. I remember being small and watching folks stare at her in town, whisper behind their hands. She never let on that it bothered her, but I saw how her shoulders would tighten, how she'd stand even straighter like she was daring them to say something." He paused, still watching the water. "She died when I was 12. Fever took her, but before she went, she made me promise something. Said there would always be people who were different, who didn't fit what others expected, and those people would need folks willing to see them as they were, not as oddities or problems. Made me promise to be one of those folks." Clara's throat felt tight. "She sounds like a wise woman." She was. He looked at her then, direct and calm. "So I help because it's right. Because you're new in town and working to make your way honestly. And because—" he shrugged. "Because everyone deserves a chance to prove what they're made of." He touched his hat and walked away, leaving Clara standing in the doorway of her makeshift home. Inside, the fire in her bucket had died to embers, but the shed felt warmer somehow. She picked up the loaf of bread from that morning, broke off a piece, and ate it slowly. Tomorrow she would start work at the laundry. Tomorrow she would earn her first dollar in Dustwill. Tomorrow she would begin building something from nothing. Tonight, though, she wrapped herself in Eli Carter's horse blanket and thought about tall women and promises and the unexpected shapes kindness could take. Outside, the Saturday night revelry continued, but here by the river, there was only the sound of water moving under ice and the distant lowing of cattle. Clara pulled on the rabbit fur gloves and held her hands to the dying embers. Somewhere in this hard town, there was a place for her. She just had to be strong enough to find it. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to find it alone. 2 weeks into her work at the laundry, Clara's hands were raw and her back ached constantly, but she had $11 saved. Mrs. Chen was a fair employer who paid promptly and never commented on Clara's height, except to note that she could reach the high lines without a stool. The work was brutal, hauling water, stirring vats of boiling clothes, wringing heavy fabric until her arms burned, but it was work, and Clara was grateful. She was hanging sheets on the line behind the laundry when a shadow fell across the white cotton. Eli Carter stood at the gate, his horse tied to the post, holding something wrapped in oilcloth. Miss Miles. Mr. Carter. She continued pinning sheets, aware of how she must look, hair escaping from its pins, sleeves rolled up, hands red and chapped. What brings you to this side of town? Message from Jake Morrison at the ranch. He held out the oilcloth bundle. His good rope split yesterday. Heard you were handy with needle and thread. Wondered if you could splice it back together. He'll pay fair. Clara dried her hands on her apron and took the bundle. Inside was a length of quality rope, frayed at the middle. I can fix this, but rope works different from fabric. It'll take time. He knows, said to name your price. $2. Eli nodded. I'll tell him. There's more, though. He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. My coat's got a tear near the shoulder. Been meaning to get it fixed before it gets worse. And some of the other boys mentioned they've got mending piling up. Ranch works hard on clothes. Clara studied him. You're offering me work. Offering you an opportunity. We'd bring the mending to town when we come for supplies. You fix what needs fixing. We pay you fair. He paused. If you're interested. Why not take it to the seamstress on Main Street? Mrs. Abernathy charges city prices for simple work, and she made it clear she doesn't mend for cowboys. Says we're too rough on our clothes, not worth her time. Clara knew there was more to it than that. She'd seen Mrs. Abernathy's shop, with its delicate laces and fine fabrics. The woman catered to the banker's wife and the doctor's daughters, not men who smelled of horse and leather. I'll need to see the coat first, Clara said. And any other items? I'll give you a fair price for the lot. Eli smiled then, that small quirk of his lips she was beginning to recognize. Figured you'd say that. It's at the ranch, which brings me to the other reason I'm here. Clara waited, hands still on the rope. Sunday's my day off. Thought I might show you where the ranch is. In case you decide to take the work, you could assess what needs doing, maybe stay for supper with the boys. They're curious about the woman who can mend anything. It was an invitation carefully presented as business, but Clara heard what he wasn't saying. A chance to earn more money. Yes, but also a chance to sit at a table with others. To be part of something for an evening instead of alone in her shed. I work Sundays. She said, Mrs. Chen needs me every day but Saturday afternoon. Saturday afternoon, then day after tomorrow. Clara hesitated. Riding out to a ranch full of men, alone with a cowboy, she barely knew it went against every rule of propriety she'd been taught. But then, she was already living in a shed by the river, doing labor that would horrify her mother. What was one more breach of convention? All right, she said. Saturday afternoon. I'll come by around 2. He touched his hat and turned to go, then paused. You might want to wear something you can ride in, unless you'd prefer the wagon. I can ride. The words came out sharper than intended, defensive. Never doubted it. His voice was mild. Saturday, then. After he left, Clara finished hanging the sheets, her mind turning over this new development. More work meant more money, meant maybe affording a real room before the worst of winter hit. But it also meant trusting Eli Carter. And trust came hard these days. That evening, she worked on the rope by lamplight, her fingers remembering skills her father had taught her. A woman should know how to mend more than just cloth. He'd said, never know what might need fixing. The work was satisfying, bringing order from chaos, making something useful whole again. Saturday came gray and cold. Clara had washed her hair and put on her second-best dress, dark blue wool that had belonged to her mother, taken in at the waist and let out everywhere else. She'd always felt like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes, but at least this one was long enough. Eli arrived precisely at 2, leading a second horse. "Figured you didn't have your own mount," he said by way of explanation. "This is Daisy. She's gentle but sure-footed." The mare was a plain brown with a white blaze, steady-eyed and calm. Clara approached slowly, let the horse smell her hand, then ran her fingers along the soft nose. "Hello, Daisy." "You do know horses." Eli sounded pleased. "Had a farm, remember?" Clara moved to the mare's side, grateful her skirts were full enough to accommodate riding astride. Side saddle had always seemed foolish to her, and she doubted Eli had one anyway. She mounted smoothly, muscle memory taking over. It had been months since she'd ridden, and the familiar rhythm of it made her throat tight with homesickness. Eli swung up on his own horse, a rangy gray, and they headed north out of town. The road wound through low hills dotted with juniper and sage. Snow lay in the hollows where the sun couldn't reach, but the main track was clear. They rode in comfortable silence at first, Clara reacquainting herself with the feel of a horse beneath her. "Tell me about your farm," Eli said eventually. Clara considered how much to share. 40 acres outside Carlisle. Good soil, reliable water. We grew corn, mainly, but my mother kept a kitchen garden that could feed half the county. My father bred horses on the side, nothing fancy, just good working stock. Sounds nice. It was. She kept her eyes on the mountains ahead. He got sick 2 winters ago. Lung fever, held on longer than the doctor expected, but... She shrugged. The farm went to my cousin Samuel. Pennsylvania law says unmarried daughters can't inherit land. That why you came west? Partly. Also because Samuel made it clear I wasn't welcome to stay. His wife didn't want another woman in the house, especially one who could work the fields better than her husband. Eli made a sound that might have been a laugh. His loss. They created a rhyme, and the Jensen ranch spread out below them. It was bigger than Clara had expected, a main house, a bunkhouse, several barns and outbuildings, all arranged around a central courtyard. Cattle dotted the nearby fields, and she could see men working with horses in a large corral. 3,000 head, Eli said, following her gaze. "Mister, Jensen runs one of the bigger operations in the valley. Fair boss, pays on time, doesn't ask more than a man can give." "How long have you worked for him?" 6 years, since I was 24. Worked my way up to lead hand last year. There was quiet pride in his voice. They rode down to the ranch, drawing curious looks from the men they passed. At the bunkhouse, Eli dismounted and helped Clara down a courtesy she didn't need but accepted gracefully. "Boys," Eli called out, and several cowboys emerged from various buildings. "This is Miss Miles. She's going to look at our mending, see what can be done." The men ranged in age from barely grown to grizzled veterans. They studied Clara with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism, but none of the leering she'd feared. These were working men, too tired for nonsense. "Ma'am," said an older cowboy with gray in his beard, "I'm Tom Beach, ranch foreman. Heard you do good work." "I try," Clara said simply. "Well, come on then. We've got a pile that's been growing since September." The pile turned out to be a mountain of damaged clothing-torn shirts. Split seams, missing buttons, worn-through knees. Clara examined each item professionally, sorting them by type of repair needed. "This'll take some time," she said finally. "But it's all fixable. I can do the simple mending for 50 cents per item. The leatherwork will cost more. That vest needs completely new stitching, probably $3. The wool coats." She fingered a badly torn sleeve. $1.50 each. Tom whistled low. "That's less than half what that woman in town charges." "I'm not her." Clara began making notes on a piece of paper Tom provided. "I'll need the items clean. Can't work with mud and other things in the fabric, and I'll need 2 weeks for all of it." "Fair enough." Tom looked at Eli. You were right about her. Clara glanced between them. Right about what? That you deal straight, Eli said. Some folks would have seen all this work and tripled their prices, figuring we were desperate. The men helped load the mending into sacks. Clara was aware of them watching her lift and carry as easily as they did, but no one commented. When everything was loaded on a pack mule, Tom invited her to stay for supper. Cook made stew. Nothing fancy, but it'll stick to your ribs. The bunkhouse was warm and smelled of coffee and tobacco. Long tables filled the main room, and Clara found herself seated between Eli and a young cowboy named Billy who couldn't have been more than 17. You really fix all that? Billy asked, eyes wide. That's the plan. My ma used to do our mending, he said wistfully. Before she passed, Pa tried, but he was no good with a needle. That's why I came west soon as I could, to make my own way. Other men shared their own stories as they ate. Tom had left a failing farm in Missouri. Another cowboy. Luis had come north from Mexico seeking better wages. They were all outcasts of a sort. Clara realized men who didn't fit the lives they'd been born to, who'd come west to build something different. What about you? She asked Eli quietly, while the others debated whether this winter would be worse than last. Virginia originally. Father had ideas about what his son should be, lawyer, maybe, or merchant. Couldn't see it myself. Headed west when I turned 18. Never looked back. He must have been disappointed. Eli's smile was rueful. Last letter I got, he said I was wasting my life playing nursemaid to cattle. That was 3 years ago. Haven't heard since. The conversation turned to ranch business, and Clara found herself oddly comfortable listening to these rough men discuss their work. No one treated her like an oddity or made crude jokes. She was simply there, accepted, part of the evening's rhythm. When it was time to go, several men shook her hand, thanking her for taking on their mending. Billy pressed a carved wooden button into her palm. For your work, he said shyly. I whittle some. Eli rode back to town with her, the pack mule trailing behind. The sun was setting, painting the mountains purple and gold. Clara felt fuller than she had in weeks, and it wasn't just from the stew. Thank you, she said as they neared the shed. For the work, yes, but also for tonight. They're good men. Just needed to see you're good people too. He helped her unload the sacks of mending. Clara. It was the first time he'd used her given name. Be careful with all this. It's valuable to them. Some of these boys only have 2 shirts to their names. I'll guard it with my life, she said, only half joking. He studied her in the fading light. I believe you will. After he left, Clara organized the mending in her shed, planning her approach with the laundry work and this. She might save enough for a real room by month's end. But more than that, she felt something shifting, like ice beginning to crack on the river. She wasn't just surviving in Dustwill anymore. She was building something, a reputation, a network of people who knew her worth. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was a life, and it was hers. That night, she lit her lamp and began with Billy's shirt, using the wooden button he'd carved. Each stitch was a promise to do good work, to prove herself worthy of their trust, to show that a woman who didn't fit could still belong somewhere. Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside her shed, Clara was warm with purpose. Martha Holloway wasn't at all what Clara expected. The baker's wife was short and round, where her husband was tall and thin, with flour perpetually dusting her dark hair and laugh lines carved deep around her eyes. She appeared at the laundry on a Tuesday morning, just as Clara was hauling water for the first wash of the day. You're the Miles girl, Martha said without preamble. The one living in that shed by the river. Clara straightened, bracing for another rejection or lecture on propriety. Yes, ma'am. Foolishness. Martha's voice was brisk, but not unkind. A woman freezing by the river when I've got a perfectly good room sitting empty above the bakery. You'll take it. What? The room. It's not much used to be storage before we built the new addition. But it's got a stove and a window and a door that locks. $20 a month. Includes firewood. Clara stared at the older woman. Your husband? Doesn't dictate who I rent to. The building's in my name, inherited from my father. Martha's chin lifted. Ronald manages the store. I manage the bakery and the rooms above it. So, do you want it or not? Yes, the word came out in a rush. Yes, but why? Because I've been watching you these past weeks, working yourself raw at the laundry, taking in mending, never complaining or begging or making trouble. That's the kind of tenant I want. Martha's expression softened slightly. And because I remember what it's like to be young and alone in a hard place. Clara moved her few possessions that evening. After finishing at the laundry, the room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a table and chair, and a tiny stove that radiated blessed warmth. A window looked out over the back alley, and wooden pegs on the wall served as a wardrobe. To Clara, it was a palace. Martha met her at the back stairs with a basket. Bread and preserves. Figure you haven't had time to stock your pantry yet. I can pay. Did I ask for payment? Martha's tone brooked no argument. Now, there's wash water in the kitchen every morning before dawn. That's when I start the ovens. You're welcome to use it. And, Clara, she paused at the door, Ronald doesn't need to know about our arrangement. As far as he's concerned, you're renting from his supplier's widow. Understand? Clara understood perfectly. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. Martha, and don't thank me yet. That stove is temperamental, and the roof leaks when the wind blows from the east. But Clara didn't care about temperamental stoves or leaky roofs. She had walls, a door, a place that was hers. That night, she slept deeply for the first time since leaving Pennsylvania. The next morning, she woke before dawn and made her way down to the bakery kitchen. Martha was already there, arms deep in dough, her movements practiced and efficient. Coffee's on the stove, Martha said without looking up. Help yourself. Clara poured a cup and watched the older woman work. Can I ask you something? Depends on the something. Your husband seems, that is, he made his feelings about me clear when I first arrived. Martha snorted. Ronald's a good man, but he's got the backbone of a wet noodle when it comes to what others think. Too worried about his reputation to see past the end of his nose. She shaped loaves with quick, sure motions. I told him straight when we married I'd be a good wife, but I wouldn't be a silent one. Took him a few years to believe me. How long have you been married? 23 years come spring. No children turned out. I couldn't carry them. Ronald wanted to put me aside, find a wife who could give him sons. Martha's hands never paused in their work. I told him he was free to try, but the bakery came with me. Amazing how quick a man's priorities clarify when money's involved. Clara sipped her coffee, processing this glimpse into the Holloway's marriage. You must have loved him once. Still do, fool that he is, but love doesn't mean blindness. I see his faults clear as day. He sees mine too, I'm sure. Martha glanced at Clara. Speaking of men, that Carter boy's been asking about you. Clara's cup paused halfway to her lips. He has… Came by yesterday for supplies. Mentioned you'd taken on mending for the Jensen Ranch. Wanted to know if you'd settled somewhere proper. Martha's eyes glinted with humor. Seemed right pleased when I told him about the room. He's been kind. Helped me find work. Honey, men don't ride 5 miles out of their way to be kind to women they're not interested in. Martha began setting loaves in the massive oven. Not that I'm pushing. You've got enough to handle without adding courting to the mix. But Eli Carter's a good man. Steady, doesn't drink much, doesn't gamble, doesn't visit the sporting houses like some. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not looking for a husband. Good. Too many girls think a wedding ring will solve all their problems. Martha dusted flour from her hands. But that doesn't mean you should close your eyes to possibility. That's all I'm saying. Clara escaped to the laundry, her mind churning. She'd been so focused on survival, She hadn't considered that Eli's attention might be more than Christian charity. The thought was unsettling and oddly warming at the same time. Mrs. Chen noticed her distraction. "You thinking too much," she said, adding lye to a steaming vat. "Work is here, in hands, not up there." She tapped her temple. "Yes, ma'am. Good room Martha give you." News traveled fast in Dustwill. "Very good. Martha smart woman. See past outside to inside." Mrs. Chen studied Clara with dark, knowing eyes, like Cowboy. Clara nearly dropped the paddle she was using to stir clothes. "I don't know what you mean." You know, just not ready to know." The older woman turned back to her work. "Is okay. Some fruit need more time to ripen." That afternoon, Clara worked on the ranch mending in her new room. The light was better here than in the shed, and she could spread the items out properly. She was reinforcing the elbow of Tom Beach's coat when footsteps echoed on the back stairs. Miss Clara, Billy's voice, uncertain. "Are you up there?" She opened the door to find the young cowboy shifting nervously, hat in hand. "Billy, is something wrong?" "No, ma'am. That is, Mr. Carter sent me. We're in town for supplies again. And he wanted to know if you'd finished any of the mending. Not rushing you," he added quickly. "Just some of the boys are down to one shirt, and it's getting colder." "I have several pieces ready." Clara gathered the completed items: 3 shirts, 2 pairs of trousers, and a vest. "Tell the men I should have the rest done by week's end." Billy took the bundle carefully. "Thank you, ma'am. Oh, and Mr. Carter said to give you this." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. Inside was payment for the completed work, plus a note in careful handwriting. "Boys are grateful. Tom says to tell you his coat fits better than when it was new. E." "Tell Mr. Carter thank you," Clara said. Billy grinned. "You could tell him yourself, ma'am. He's at the general store, likely there for another hour at least." After the boy left, Clara sat at her table, staring at the money and note. Martha's words echoed, "Men don't ride 5 miles out of their way to be kind." Before she could talk herself out of it, Clara pinned her hair neatly and walked to the general store. She told herself she needed thread anyway. The mending was using her supply quickly. The store was busy with afternoon shoppers. Ronald Holloway looked up as she entered, his mouth tightening, but he served her without comment, and if he charged slightly more than usual for thread. Clara didn't argue. She was examining buttons when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Miss Miles." Clara turned. Eli stood there in his work clothes, holding a list and looking pleased. "Mr. Carter, Billy said you were in town. Picking up winter supplies, salt for the cattle, extra grain." He gestured to her thread. "More mending. Business is good, thanks to you. Thanks to your skill. I just made the connection." They stood awkwardly for a moment, aware of the other customers watching. In a place like Dustwill, a single man talking to a single woman was noteworthy, especially when the woman towered over most of the other shoppers. "Would you—" Eli paused, then started again. "That is, I was planning to take coffee at the hotel restaurant before heading back. Would you join me?" Clara heard Martha's voice in her head. "Don't close your eyes to possibility." "I'd like that," she said. The hotel restaurant was nearly empty in the late afternoon. They took a table by the window, where they could watch the street. The waitress, a pinched woman named Mrs. Claiborne, looked scandalized but served them without comment. "How's the new room?" Eli asked once they had their coffee. "Much better than the shed. Warmer. Martha Holloway's good people, speaks her mind. She does that." Clara smiled, remembering the baker's frank assessment of her husband. "Must have been hard," Eli said carefully, "leaving everything you knew." Clara considered her answer. "Yes and no. The farm was home, but after Father died, I was just marking time, waiting for something. I didn't know what until Cousin Howard made it clear I had to go. She traced the rim of her cup. Maybe it was a blessing. I never would have left on my own. Takes courage, starting over. Or desperation. Same thing, sometimes. They talked easily after that. About inconsequential things the coming winter, the ranch work, Clara's plans to expand her mending business. Eli told her about a horse he was training, a difficult mare with trust issues. She's smart, though too smart. Figures out what you want and then does the opposite just to prove she can. Sounds like someone I know, Clara said dryly. Eli's smile was warm. You're smarter than her. You do what needs doing regardless. When it was time for him to go, he insisted on paying for the coffee. You can get it next time, he said, then colored slightly. That is, if there is a next time. I'd like that, Clara said softly. Outside the hotel, they paused. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold, and for a moment, Clara felt like a normal woman saying goodbye to a man who'd taken her for coffee. Not too tall, not too strong, not too anything. Just herself. Clara, Eli said, and she realized it was the second time he'd used her given name. I'm glad you came to Dustwill. He touched his hat and was gone, leaving Clara standing on the boardwalk with a strange flutter in her chest. She walked back to the bakery slowly, aware of the whispers that followed her. By morning, everyone would know Eli Carter had taken Clara Miles for coffee. Martha was waiting in the kitchen, a knowing smile on her face. Well, we had coffee. Clara said firmly, that's all. Martha handed her a fresh roll. That's how it starts. How what starts? The thaw, Martha said cryptically. Now go eat something proper. You're too thin. That night, Clara sat by her window, watching snow fall on Dustwill. 6 weeks ago, she'd arrived with nothing but hurt and determination. Now she had work, a room, something that might be friendship with Martha, and whatever this was with Eli Carter. She thought about her father's farm, about the life she'd expected to live. This wasn't it, this frontier town with its rough edges and hard people. But maybe that was all right. Maybe the life you built with your own hands was worth more than the one you inherited. In the morning, there would be laundry and mending and all the small battles of survival. But tonight, Clara Miles sat warm and safe in her own room, thinking about a cowboy's smile and the way he said her name like it was something worth knowing. The thaw, Martha had called it. Clara pressed her hand to the cold window and wondered if spring might come after all, even here at the edge of the world. The Christmas dance was 3 days away, and Clara had already decided not to go. She mentioned this to Martha while helping knead dough in the pre-dawn darkness, expecting agreement. Instead, the baker woman slammed her palm on the flowery table. Of course you're going. Martha, be reasonable. I don't have a proper dress. I don't know the dances. And nothing. You think I'm letting you hide in that room while the whole town celebrates not likely? Martha attacked the dough with renewed vigor. As for a dress, we'll handle that. Clara learned that arguing with Martha was like arguing with the wind, exhausting and pointless. By that afternoon, she found herself standing on a crate in Martha's parlor while the baker woman circled her with pins in her mouth and measuring tape in hand. This was mine, Martha said around the pins, gesturing to the green silk dress draped over a chair. From before I spread out like rising dough. Good fabric, barely worn. We'll take it apart, add some length from this brown velvet. Maybe use the leftover for trim. I can't accept this, Clara protested, though her fingers couldn't help stroking the silk. She'd never owned anything so fine. You're not accepting. You're helping me clean out my wardrobe. Besides, Martha's eyes twinkled. I want to see Ronald's face when you walk in looking like a queen. Hold still. For 3 days, they worked on the dress in stolen moments. Clara discovered that Martha was an accomplished seamstress who'd given it up when the bakery demanded all her time. Together, They transformed the old dress into something new, elegant, but not flashy, with a fitted bodice that made the most of Clara's height rather than trying to disguise it. "You look like yourself," Martha said the night before the dance, surveying their work. "Just more so." Clara studied her reflection in Martha's mirror. The woman looking back seemed a stranger, still tall, still strong, but somehow softer too. "I don't know if that's good or bad." "It's good. Trust me." The night of the dance. Clara nearly changed her mind 3 times. The town hall was lit up like a beacon, music and laughter spilling out into the snowy street. She could see people through the windows, couples already dancing, children darting between adults' legs, older folks holding court along the walls. "Go on," Martha said, giving her a gentle push. "I'll be along soon with the pies." Clara climbed the steps on unsteady legs. At the door, she paused, took a breath, and entered. The music stopped. Not officially, the fiddler's bow simply faltered, and the silence spread like ripples on water. Every head turned. Clara stood frozen, acutely aware of how she towered over the other women. How different she looked despite the beautiful dress. Then, from across the room, movement. Eli Carter set down his cup and walked toward her, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. He'd trimmed his beard and wore a clean white shirt. She recognized she'd mended the cuff just last week. He stopped in front of her and held out his hand. "Miss Miles, would you honor me with this dance?" Clara had practiced with Martha, but her mind went blank. I'm not very good at dancing." "Neither am I." His eyes were steady on hers. "We'll muddle through together." She placed her hand in his. It should have felt strange, being led to the dance floor by a man several inches shorter. But Eli moved with the same quiet confidence he showed on horseback, and when he placed his hand on her waist, Clara found she had to look down only slightly to meet his eyes. The fiddler, recovering, struck up a waltz. Other instruments joined in: a guitar, a harmonica, someone keeping time with spoons. Eli led her into the dance, and miracle of miracles, Clara's feet remembered what Martha had taught her. "You're doing fine," he murmured when she stumbled slightly. "Just follow me." Around them, other couples began to dance again. The spell was broken, or perhaps just transformed into something else. Clara was aware of eyes still watching, whispers behind hands. But for the moment, none of it mattered. There was only the music and Eli's hand steady at her waist and the warmth in his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Martha made the dress." Wasn't talking about the dress. They danced 2 more songs before Clara begged for a rest. Her feet hurt. Martha had only been able to do so much with Clara's work boots. Disguising them with fabric didn't make them dancing shoes. Eli fetched her punch while she found a chair. Well. Hank Bowman materialized beside her. The cowboy who'd accosted her that first week. He'd been drinking, she could smell it on him. "Don't you clean up nice? Almost look like a real woman." Clara's shoulders tensed, but before she could respond, another voice cut in. "Miss Miles, there you are." Tom Beach appeared, the ranch foreman looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best. "Been wanting to thank you proper for fixing my coat. Wife says she couldn't have done better herself." Hank scowled, but didn't challenge the older man. Tom settled his bulk on the chair beside Clara, effectively blocking Hank's access. "Don't mind him," Tom said quietly once Hank had slunk away. "Boy's got more mouth than sense." "Thank you, Mr. Beach." "Tom, and no thanks needed. Eli's a good man. One of my best. He asks us to keep an eye on you at this shindig. We keep an eye." Clara glanced across the room where Eli was still waiting at the punch table, talking with Billy and some of the other ranch hands. "He asked you to watch out for me. Made sure some of us boys would be here tonight. Didn't say why exactly, but didn't need to." Tom's weathered face creased in a smile. "Man doesn't gather up his crew for a town dance unless he's got good reason." Before Clara could process this, The music changed to a lively reel. Billy appeared, blushing furiously. "Miss Clara, would you— that is, could I have this dance? I promise not to step on your feet. Much." Clara found herself passed from partner to partner among the Jensen ranch hands. Luis taught her a Spanish dance that had everyone clapping. Young Billy did indeed step on her feet, but was so mortified she pretended not to notice. Even gruff Tom took a turn, surprisingly light on his feet for such a big man. Between dances, she helped Martha serve pie and caught up with Mrs. Chen, who wore a silk dress that made her look like elegantly aged royalty. Even Ronald Holloway nodded to her, though he quickly looked away when Martha shot him a meaningful glare. "You're enjoying yourself." Eli appeared at her elbow during a break in the music. "I am," Clara realized with surprise. "I truly am." "Good. Though I'm hoping you'll save me another dance before the evening's through." "Just one." His smile was slow and warm. "As many as you'll give me." They danced again as the evening wound down, this time to a slow melody that had couples swaying close. Clara was aware of every point of contact, his hand on her waist, her hand on his shoulder, their joined hands between them. "Thank you," she said softly. "For tonight? For making sure I'd be safe." "You don't need protection," Eli said, "but figured it couldn't hurt to have friends nearby, in case." "Is that what we are, friends?" His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "What do you want us to be?" It was a dangerous question, asked in a voice that sent warmth down her spine. Clara thought of all the reasons she should be careful she barely knew him. She had only just gotten settled. She wasn't the kind of woman men courted properly. But then she looked at him, this man who saw her height as strength, who made sure she was safe without making her feel weak, who danced with her like she was precious and normal all at once. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I'd like to find out." Something flared in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or joy. "So would I." The dance ended too soon. As the crowd began to disperse, Eli walked her to the door. Outside, snow was falling again, fat flakes that caught the light from the windows. "May I call on you?" he asked formally. Proper-like, I mean, not just for mending or chance meetings. Clara thought of what the town would say, what they were probably already saying. Then she thought of Martha's words about not closing her eyes to possibility. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." He smiled then, bright and boyish, and Clara's heart did something complicated in her chest. Sunday after church. "I don't attend church." She waited for judgment, but he just nodded. "Sunday afternoon, then we could walk by the river if the weather's fair." "I'd enjoy that." He took her hand, held it briefly. His fingers were calloused and warm, and Clara felt the touch all the way up her arm. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Eli." She floated back to the bakery, barely feeling the cold. Martha was waiting with hot tea and eager eyes. "Well, how was it?" Clara sank into a chair, still wearing the beautiful dress. "He asked to call on me, properly." Martha clapped her hands. "I knew it. Oh, Ronald owes me $5. He bet Eli would take another month to work up the courage." "You wagered on this?" "Honey, half the town's been wagering on when that boy would make his move. The other half was betting on whether you'd accept." Martha poured herself tea. "I cleaned up tonight, I'll tell you." Clara laughed, surprising herself. 6 weeks ago, the idea of being the subject of town gossip would have mortified her. Now, warm with dancing and possibility, she found she didn't much care. "Do you think—" she began, then stopped. "Think what?" "Do you think it could work, him and me? We're so different." Martha snorted. "Different how? You're both honest, hard-working people who know what it's like to not quite fit. Seems to me you've got more in common than most." She leaned forward. "Clara, I've lived in this town 20 years. I've never seen Eli Carter look at anyone the way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and taught it to shine." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted. I came here to work, to build something on my own. I didn't expect this. The best things in life are usually unexpected, Martha said gently. Doesn't mean they're not worth having. That night, Clara hung the green dress carefully on the wall pegs and lay in her narrow bed, reliving every moment of the evening, the way Eli's hand felt on her waist, the acceptance from the ranch hands, the music and laughter and, yes, even the stares and whispers. She'd come to Dustwill as a refugee, tall and awkward and unwanted. Tonight, she'd danced in a beautiful dress with a good man who wanted to court her properly. It wasn't a fairy tale, she still had laundry to do in the morning, mending to finish, a life to build penny by penny. But maybe, just maybe, she was building something more than mere survival. Maybe she was building a future that included Saturday afternoon walks and Sunday visits and the steady presence of a man who saw her truly. Clara pulled the quilts up to her chin and smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight she was a woman who had been asked to dance, who had said yes, who had discovered that even in the hardest ground, something tender could grow. The snow continued to fall, blanketing Dustwill in temporary softness, and Clara Miles, no longer alone, finally fell asleep. The ice broke with a sound like gunshot. Clara was hanging the wash behind the laundry when she heard it a sharp crack, followed by shouting and the terrible splash of something heavy hitting water. She dropped the wet shirt and ran toward the river, her long legs eating up the distance. A crowd had already gathered on the bank. Through the press of bodies, Clara could see a horse thrashing in the icy water, its eyes rolling white with panic. And there, trying to calm it while being dragged deeper by the current, Eli! The name tore from her throat. He was chest deep in the freezing river, one hand tangled in the horse's reins, the other trying to grab onto the broken ice shelf. Each time he got close, the panicked animal pulled him back toward the center where the current ran strongest. "Someone throw him a rope!" Clara shouted. But the men on the bank seemed frozen by shock. The horse was valuable, one of Mr. Jensen's prize mares, but the water was deadly cold. Tom Beach was already uncoiling his lasso, but Clara could see they were running out of time. Eli's movements were becoming sluggish, his face gray with cold. The horse's thrashing was weakening too, both of them succumbing to the river's icy grip. Clara didn't think. She kicked off her boots, shed her heavy coat, and plunged into the water. The cold hit like a physical blow, driving all breath from her lungs. But her father had taught her to swim in the farm pond, and her height was an advantage here. She could touch bottom where Eli couldn't. She waded out, fighting the current, until she reached him. "Let go of the reins," she shouted over the horse's frightened whinnies. "Can't, Jensen's mare." His teeth were chattering so hard he could barely speak. "She'll swim out on her own once you let go. Trust me." Clara grabbed his arm, felt how cold he was even through his soaked shirt. "Eli, please." Something in her voice reached him. He released the reins, and immediately, the current caught him. Clara wrapped her arms around his chest from behind, using her height and her footing to keep them both stable. "Tom," she called. "Now." The foreman's rope sailed through the air, landing just within reach. Clara grabbed it with one hand, keeping the other arm locked around Eli. "Pull," she shouted. The men on the bank hauled them in, inch by painful inch. Clara's feet slipped on the rocky bottom, her muscles screaming with cold and effort. But she didn't let go. She could feel Eli's weight increasing as his strength failed, his body going limp against hers. Then hands were reaching for them, pulling them up onto solid ground. Someone threw a blanket around her shoulders. Someone else was working on Eli, who lay frighteningly still on the frozen grass. "Get him to Doc Morrison," Tom barked. "Billy, right ahead. Tell him we're coming." Clara tried to stand, to follow, but her legs wouldn't work properly. Martha appeared from nowhere, wrapping her in additional blankets. "Foolish girl," she scolded, but her eyes were bright with tears. "Brave, wonderful, foolish girl." The horse, Clara managed through chattering teeth. Made it out downstream. Someone said, "You were right once he let go. She swam right to shore." They bundled Clara back to the bakery, where Martha forced her into a hot bath and dry clothes. But Clara couldn't settle, couldn't stop shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. "I need to see him," she insisted. "You need to get warm." "Martha, please." The older woman sighed. "Stubborn as a mule, fine, but you're wearing every coat I own." Doc Morrison's office was crowded with ranch hands. They parted silently as Clara entered, their faces grave. Tom stood by the door to the back room, hat in hands. "How is he?" Clara asked. "Doc's with him now. Got him warmed up, stitching a gash on his head where the ice caught him." Tom's weathered face was grim. "Could have been worse. Would have been, if you hadn't." "Can I see him?" Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Doc said he was asking for you." The back room smelled of carbolic and wet wool. Eli lay on the narrow bed, a bandage around his head, quilts piled high. His color was better, but he looked diminished somehow, younger. Doc Morrison, a thin man with gentle hands, looked up as she entered. "Ah, our heroine. Heard you took a swim yourself." "I'm fine." Clara moved closer to the bed. "Is he—" "Concussed, half frozen, and lucky to be alive. But he'll recover." The doctor began packing his instruments. "I'll give you a few minutes, but don't tire him." When they were alone, Clara sank into the chair beside the bed. Eli's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on her face. "Clara," his voice was rough, "you're all right. You're asking me that you're the one who nearly—" She couldn't finish. "Had to save the mare. Jensen paid good money for her bloodline." He tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "Did she make it?" "Yes, everyone's fine except you." "Worth it, then." "No," Clara said fiercely. "No horse is worth your life." He studied her for a long moment. "You jumped in after me. You would have done the same. That's different." "Why?" "Because I'm not—" He paused, seemed to reconsider. "Thank you." Clara took his hand, careful of the scrapes and bruises. "Don't ever scare me like that again." "Can't promise. Ranch work's dangerous." His fingers tightened around hers. "But I'll try to be more careful." They sat in silence, hands clasped. Through the thin walls, Clara could hear the murmur of voices in the outer office, the occasional stamp of boots, the normal sounds of life continuing. While in here, something had shifted between them. "I was so frightened," she admitted quietly. "When I saw you in the water, I know. I saw your face when you came after me." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "No one's ever looked that scared for me before." "Well, get used to it. Because if you think I'm letting you court me just so you can get yourself killed doing something foolish." "Court you?" A smile tugged at his battered face. "That mean you're accepting my suit?" "Miss Miles." Clara realized what she'd said and felt heat flood her cheeks. That is—" "Because a man likes to know these things. Makes the near drowning worthwhile. Eli Carter, you're impossible." "Maybe, but I'm your impossible now. Seems like—" Doc Morrison returned then, shooing Clara out with orders for Eli to rest. The ranch hands were still waiting, their relief palpable when she reported Eli would recover. "We owe you," Tom said simply. "All of us. That was brave, what you did." "It was necessary," Clara corrected. "Anyone would have—" "No," Luis interrupted. "Many people stand on bank and watch. You jump in. This is different thing." Billy, young face earnest, added, "Ma'am, Eli's the one who hired me when no one else would, on account of my age. He's taught me everything. If something had happened to him—" "But it didn't," Clara said firmly. "He's going to be fine." The men dispersed slowly. heading back to the ranch or the saloons. Clara walked home with Martha, who had waited despite the cold. "You love him," Martha said. It wasn't a question. Clara considered denying it, then simply said, "Yes." "Good. About time you admitted it." Martha linked their arms. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, and the most foolhardy. You could have died." "So could he." "Yes, but men do foolish things all the time. It's expected. A woman risking her life for a man who's not even her husband yet, that'll have tongues wagging for months." "Let them wag." Martha squeezed her arm. "That's my girl." The story spread through Dustwill like wildfire. By evening, Clara had become either a hero or a scandal, depending on who was telling it. She ignored them all, focused on her work and on the hourly updates Tom sent about Eli's condition. 2 days later, Eli appeared at the laundry, moving stiffly but determinedly. "Mrs." Chen took one look at him and ordered him to sit before he fell down. "Should you be up?" Clara demanded, abandoning her washing. "Doc cleared me, mostly." He pulled a slightly crushed bundle from inside his coat. "Brought you something." Inside the paper was a length of blue ribbon, fine quality, the color of a winter sky. "For your hair," he said. "Saw it at the Mercantile last month. Been waiting for the right moment." "Eli?" Clara's throat felt tight. "Almost dying gives a man clarity," he said seriously. "Makes him realize he should say things while he can, so I'm saying them." He took her wet, reddened hands in his. "Clara Miles, I've been half in love with you since you stepped off that stage. Proud and scared and ready to fight the world. Full in love since you mended Billy's shirt with the same care you'd give the finest silk." Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "I know I'm not much," he continued. "Just a cowboy with rough hands and a dangerous job. But I'm steady and I'm true, and I think—" He paused, vulnerability flickering across his face. "I think we could build something good together, if you're willing." "You're asking me to marry you?" Clara's voice came out as a whisper. "Not yet. Asking if you'd let me court you proper, with the intention of marriage. Want to do this right." His hands tightened on hers. "What do you say?" Clara thought of all the reasons to be sensible. They'd known each other only months. She'd come here to be independent. The town already gossiped about them. A dozen reasons to say no. But stronger than all of that was the memory of him in the icy water. The terror of almost losing him. The warmth of his hand in hers. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll let you court me. Yes to all of it." His smile was bright as sun on snow. He stood, swayed slightly, and before Clara could protest, kissed her cheek quick and chaste, but somehow perfect. "I'll do right by you," he promised. "You'll see." "I know," Clara said, and found she meant it. Mrs. Chen, who had been pretending not to watch, snorted from across the room. "About time. Now go sit down before you fall down, Cowboy, and you." She pointed at Clara. "Back to work. Love doesn't wash clothes." But she was smiling as she said it. That night, Clara sat at her window, the blue ribbon wound through her fingers. Below in the street, she could see people going about their evening business. Some looked up at her window and whispered. Let them, she thought. She'd earned her place here through work and courage. If they wanted to gossip about her romance with Eli Carter, so be it. She'd come to Dustwill with nothing but hurt and hope. Now she had work, friends, a home of sorts. And she had Eli battered but healing, offering her a future she hadn't dared imagine. Clara tied the ribbon in her hair and smiled at her reflection. Tomorrow there would be laundry and mending and all the usual struggles. But tonight, she was a woman who had been courted properly by a man who saw her truly. A woman who had jumped into an icy river and pulled out something precious. A woman who was no longer alone. The whispers started small, like smoke seeping under a door. Clara noticed them first at the general store. where conversations stopped mid-sentence when she entered. Then at the laundry, where Mrs. Chen's regular customers suddenly had pressing business elsewhere when Clara was working. By the third week of her courtship with Eli, the whispers had become a roar. "It's unseemly." Clara overheard Mrs. Abernathy saying to her circle outside the millinery shop, "A woman like that, throwing herself at men. Did you hear she actually went to the ranch alone? No proper woman would. And jumping in the river after him," another woman added. So theatrical, clearly trying to trap him into feeling obligated. Clara kept walking, her jaw tight, hands clenched in her skirts. She'd expected some gossip, but the viciousness of it caught her off guard. Worse were the looks, not just curiosity now, but judgment, disapproval, even disgust. Martha found her that evening sitting in her room, staring at nothing. "Don't you dare let those harpies get to you," she said, setting down a tray of tea and fresh bread. "They think that I'm loose, that I'm trying to trap Eli. They think you don't belong. You're too tall, too strong, too capable. You make them feel small just by existing." Martha poured tea with angry precision. "And now you've got the attention of one of the few good men in this town. Of course they're spitting mad." "Maybe they're right. Maybe I should what, give up, run away, let them win?" Martha's voice was fierce. "Clara Miles, you've survived being disowned, homeless, nearly freezing to death. You're going to let a bunch of bitter gossips defeat you." But it wasn't just the women. Clara began to notice how men looked at her, now speculative, knowing, as if her relationship with Eli meant she was available for consideration. Hank Bowman was the worst, always seeming to appear when she was alone, making comments just shy of improper. "Heard Carter's been calling on you regular," he said one afternoon, blocking her path outside the post office. "Funny how you wouldn't give me the time of day, but for him you'll jump in rivers." "Excuse me." Clara tried to move past, but he shifted to block her again. "Just wondering what he's got that I don't. Maybe you like them shorter, makes you feel more like the man." "Let me pass." "Or maybe," his voice dropped lower, "you're not as particular as you pretend. Maybe if a man knew what you really wanted." "They're a problem here." Tom Beach materialized beside them, his weathered face hard. Hank backed off, hands raised. "Just talking to the lady, Tom. No harm meant." "Good. Then you won't mind moving along." After Hank left, Tom turned to Clara. "You all right, miss?" "Fine, thank you. Eli know folks are giving you trouble?" "No, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. He's got enough to worry about with the ranch." Tom studied her, respectfully. "Miss, that's not your call. Man's got a right to know when his woman's being harassed." His woman? The words should have bothered Clara, but instead they sent warmth through her chest. "I can handle it." "No doubt, but you shouldn't have to handle it alone." That evening, Eli arrived for their usual walk, but Clara could barely meet his eyes. The weight of the town's judgment sat on her shoulders like a yoke. They walked in unusual silence until they reached their favorite spot by the river, where a fallen log made a natural bench. "All right," Eli said finally. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Clara." His voice was gentle but firm. "I may not have your education, but I'm not stupid. You've barely looked at me since I got here. If I've done something—" "You haven't done anything." The words came out sharper than intended. "That's the problem." He waited, patient as always. "People are talking," Clara said finally. "About us, about me. They think I'm not respectable, that I'm trying to trap you, or that I'm—" She couldn't say the words. "I know." She looked at him, startled. "You know?" "Course I know. This is a small town. Clara, did you think the boys wouldn't tell me what they were hearing?" His jaw tightened. "Had a word with Hank Bowman yesterday about keeping his thoughts to himself." "You didn't fight." "Didn't need to. Just explained how things were, man to man." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He won't bother you again. But the others, the women especially, are jealous, bitter, or bored. Sometimes all three. He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. Clara, did you think I didn't know what I was doing when I started courting you? Did you think I cared what people would say? You should care. Your reputation. My reputation is my business, and I'd rather be known as the man smart enough to court Clara Miles than the fool who let town gossip keep him from the best thing in his life. Clara's throat felt tight. I don't want to hurt your standing with the others. Your work. Mr. Jensen judges a man by his work, not his personal life. Tom backs me. The boys respect you after what you did at the river. The rest, he shrugged. The rest don't matter. They matter to me, Clara said quietly. I have to live here too, work here. And it's getting harder. People don't want to give me their mending. They don't want me washing their clothes. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, pulling her up with him. Come on. Where are we going? To fix this. He led her back to town, not to her room or the bakery, but straight to the hotel restaurant where many of the town's prominent citizens took their evening meal. The dining room was nearly full, conversations humming. As they entered, silence spread like spilled water. Eli didn't hesitate. He walked Clara to a prominent table, pulled out her chair, and sat across from her as if they dined there every night. Eli, Clara whispered, what are you doing? Making something clear. He spoke at normal volume, not whispering, ensuring his voice carried, I'm courting you, properly and with intention. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The waitress approached nervously. Eli ordered for them both, his manner calm and assured. Slowly. Conversations resumed around them, though Clara could feel the weight of every glance. This won't stop the talk, she murmured. No, but it'll change it. Now they know where I stand. He reached across the table, took her hand in full view of everyone. Where we stand. It was such a simple gesture, but so public, so declarative. Clara felt tears threaten. You could have any woman in this town, someone smaller, prettier, more proper. Don't want any woman, want you. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. The woman who sees a need and fills it, who works harder than any two men I know, who jumped into an icy river without thinking twice because someone needed help. That was foolish. That was love, he corrected gently, even if you didn't know it yet. They ate their meal under the weight of dozens of stares, but Eli kept up a steady stream of conversation about the ranch, the weather, anything normal. By the time they finished, Clara found the attention had lost some of its sting. Walking back to the bakery, they encountered Mrs. Abernathy and her circle. The women's faces were pinched with disapproval, but before they could speak, another voice cut through the evening air. Clara. There you are, Mrs. Jensen, the ranch owner's wife, swept up in a rustle of silk. She was small and elegant, everything Clara wasn't, but her smile was warm and genuine. I've been meaning to thank you for the wonderful work you did on Mr. Jensen's coat. He says it fits better than when it was new. Clara blinked, stunned. Thank you, ma'am. Please, call me Helen. She turned to the other women, her smile never wavering but something steely entering her eyes. Ladies, enjoying the evening, Mrs. Abernathy. How is that rash clearing up, the one you asked Doc Morrison about? So embarrassing when these things happen. Mrs. Abernathy flushed deep red. That is... Oh, was it meant to be private? How silly of me. Helen linked her arm through Clara's. Walk with me. Dear, I want to discuss having you make some shirts for Mr. Jensen. The quality of your work is so superior to what we've been getting. She drew Clara away, Eli following with poorly hidden amusement. Once they were out of earshot, Helen patted Clara's arm. Horrible woman. She's been spreading her poison for years. Helen's refined features showed satisfaction. About time someone stood up to her. Mrs. Jensen, I don't know what to say. Say you'll come to tea tomorrow. I want to hear all about your mending business. And Clara, she smiled. Welcome to Dustwill. Really welcome. I mean, not all of us are small-minded fools. She swept off, leaving Clara stunned and Eli grinning. The cavalry arrives, he said. Didn't do anything. Helen Jensen makes up her own mind. Always has. He walked her to the bakery door. See, you've got more allies than you think. Martha was waiting with tea and keen eyes. Saw Helen Jensen put that Abernathy woman in her place. The whole town's talking about it. Let them talk, Clara said, surprising herself with her firmness. That's my girl. Martha studied her. You all right? I think so. I think I'm going to be. That night, Clara lay in bed thinking about the evening. The gossip wouldn't stop overnight. There would still be whispers, still be those who judged her. But she had Eli, steady and true. She had Martha and Mrs. Chen. Now she had Helen Jensen, whose approval carried real weight in Dustwill. More than that, she had herself. She'd survived worse than gossip. She'd built a life from nothing. She wouldn't let bitter words tear it down. Tomorrow there would be new challenges. There always were. But tonight, she fell asleep thinking of Eli's hand holding hers across that restaurant table, claiming her publicly, proudly. She was Clara Miles. She was being courted by Eli Carter, and despite what the gossip said, she belonged here as much as anyone. Let them talk. She had better things to do than listen. The river ice gleamed like silver in the late afternoon sun. Clara and Eli walked slowly along the bank, their breath misting in the cold air. It had become their routine Sunday walks when he could get away from the ranch, stolen moments between her work and his. 3 months of courtship had passed, 3 months of small gifts and smaller touches, of conversations that lasted until the stars came out, of learning each other's rhythms and silences. The town gossip had died to a low murmur, especially after Helen Jensen had made a point of commissioning Clara for several high-profile projects. But today, something was different. Eli seemed nervous, his usual easy manner replaced by a tension Clara could feel in the air between them. Spring's coming early this year, he said finally, gesturing at the ice. See how it's thinning at the edges another week or two. The thaw'll start proper. That's good for the ranch. Isn't it easier grazing? Yeah. He stopped walking, turned to face her. Clara, I need to ask you something. Her heart stuttered. These past weeks, she'd felt them building towards something. But now that the moment was here, she found herself frightened. Ask. He took her hands, his calloused fingers warm against her cold ones. I've been thinking about us, about what comes next. Clara waited, not trusting her voice. I love you, he said simply. Have for months now. I want to marry you, make a life together. But before I ask proper, there's something I need to know. The words came out in a rush, and then he stopped, color rising in his cheeks. Clara had never seen him so unsettled. What is it? She asked gently. He looked at the river, then back at her. Your first night, that is, have you already promised it to someone? The question hung in the cold air between them. Clara understood immediately what he was asking, not crude or presumptuous, but careful, respectful. In a frontier town, with limited prospects and harsh realities, not all women came to marriage untouched. Eli was giving her the chance to be honest, without judgment. No, she said quietly, feeling heat rise in her own cheeks. There's been no one. Back home, there was a boy who courted me briefly, but when he realized I was taller than him even in his Sunday boots, he found excuses to stop calling. She laughed, but it came out shaky. And since then, well, you've seen how men look at me. Like I'm either a curiosity or a challenge, never just a woman. You're wrong there. Eli's hands tightened on hers. "You're very much a woman, the most woman I've ever met." Eli, I'm not that kind of man. Clara, I just needed to know if there were any promises I should be aware of. Any complications." He pulled her closer, voice dropping. "Because if you'll have me, I want to do this right. Church wedding, proper ceremony. I want everyone in this town to know that Clara Miles chose me, and I was the luckiest man alive because of it." Clara's throat felt tight. "You're sure your family back east hasn't written in 3 years? The height difference means I get to look up at you, which is no hardship. I'm not delicate or refined or—" "Clara," he released one of her hands to cup her cheek. "I don't want delicate. I want the woman who hauled her own trunk through town rather than ask for help, who jumped in a frozen river without thinking twice, who mends shirts with the same care she'd give a wedding dress." His thumb stroked her cheekbone. "I want you, just as you are." The wind picked up, swirling snow around them, but Clara barely felt the cold. "Then yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." He smiled then, bright and boyish, and pulled her down for a kiss. It was their first real kiss, there by the frozen river where everything had started. His lips were warm and sure, and Clara felt something inside her, frozen as the river, begin to thaw. When they broke apart, both breathing harder, Eli rested his forehead against hers. Soon, Clara surprised herself with the urgency in her voice. "I don't need a long engagement, don't need fancy preparations. I want to start our life." "Spring," he decided. "Soon as the road's clear and we can get a preacher, that'll give me time to finish the cabin." Cabin. Been building it in my off hours. Nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a good fireplace. But it's on the prettiest piece of land, mister. Jensen's willing to sell. Close enough to town for your work. Close enough to the ranch for mine. He looked almost shy. Been planning it since the day you mended Billy's shirt. Clara kissed him again, quick and fierce. "Show me!" They rode out as the sun began to set. Clara sitting in front of Eli on his horse, his arms around her as he held the reins. It was improper, but she was past caring about propriety. The cabin sat on a small rise overlooking a creek different from the river, smaller and friendlier. The structure was simple but solid. The logs fitted tight, the roof already shingled against the weather. "It's not finished inside," Eli warned as they dismounted. "Still need to build furniture, put in windows, but the bones are good." Clara walked through the space, touching the walls, imagining. Here, a kitchen table. There, chairs by the fireplace, a bedroom beyond the doorway, private and theirs. "It's perfect," she said. "You haven't seen the best part." He led her behind the cabin to where a small addition jutted out. "Thought you'd need a workroom. For your mending. Good light from the south. Room for a proper table and chair. Maybe shelves for supplies." Clara turned to him, eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. "You built me a sewing room." "Will build? Haven't started that part yet." He looked anxious. "If you don't like it..." She silenced him with another kiss. "I love it. I love you." They stayed until full dark, planning and dreaming. By the time Eli delivered her back to the bakery, stars were scattered across the clear sky like spilled salt. Martha took one look at Clara's face and clapped her hands. "Finally, I was beginning to think that boy would never work up the nerve." "He proposed by the river," Clara said, still feeling dazed. "Asked about my first night." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Bold of him. What did you say?" "The truth, that there's been no one?" "And he believed you. Why wouldn't he?" Martha sighed. "Oh, honey, you really don't know how rare you are, do you? A woman your age, unmarried, making her own way, most men would assume things." "Eli isn't most men." "No," Martha agreed. He certainly isn't. The news spread through Dustwill like wildfire. By morning, everyone knew that Eli Carter had proposed to Clara Miles by the frozen river, that she'd accepted, that they planned a spring wedding. Reactions were mixed. Helen Jensen sent a note of congratulation and an offer to help with wedding preparations. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly and gave Clara the afternoon off. Tom Beach and the ranch hands started a collection for a wedding gift. But others were less kind. Mrs. Abernathy made sure to loudly wonder what really happened by that river. Hank Bowman got drunk and made some unfortunate comments that earned him a black eye from Billy, of all people. Clara weathered it all with new equanimity. She had Eli. She had a future. Let them talk. The only shadow came 3 days later when a letter arrived for Eli at the ranch. Tom brought it to town specially, his face grave. From Virginia. He told Eli when they met at the general store, "Your father's hand." Eli stared at the letter like it might bite. He'd mentioned his father only in passing, a stern man with rigid ideas about proper life. 3 years of silence. And now this. "Want me to go?" Clara asked quietly. "No, stay." He broke the seal, read quickly. His face went very still. "What is it?" Wordlessly, he handed her the letter. The handwriting was sharp, angry. "Word has reached me of your intention to marry some Amazon woman, a laborer who washes clothes and mends shirts for cowboys. Have you lost all sense of propriety, all family pride? You've already disappointed me by choosing this rough life over the opportunities I provided. Must you compound that disappointment by marrying beneath yourself as well? If you proceed with this foolishness, you are no son of mine. The Carter name will not be associated with such a union. Consider carefully whether this woman is worth losing your family entirely. Your father, Josiah Carter." Clara's hands trembled as she finished reading. "Eli, He doesn't know you," Eli said flatly. "Doesn't know anything about you except gossip and his own prejudices. But your family, you're my family. You and the future we're building." He took the letter back, walked to the stove in the corner of the store, and fed it to the flames. "There, done." "You can't just burn it." "Already did." He turned back to her, eyes fierce. "Clara, I made my choice when I left Virginia, made it again when I stayed here instead of going back, and I'm making it now. You're worth more than a name I never wanted anyway." Clara felt tears spill over. "I don't want to cost you." "You're not costing me anything." "He is, with his pride and his narrow mind and his inability to see past his own nose." Eli pulled her into his arms, right there in the store where anyone could see. "I love you. That's all that matters." "Mr. Holloway cleared his throat from behind the counter. "Perhaps you'd like to continue this conversation somewhere more private." But for once, his disapproval seemed mild, almost sympathetic. Perhaps Martha had been working on him. They left the store together, walking toward the river because that's where they always seemed to end up when emotions ran high. "I'm sorry," Clara said finally, "about your father. I'm not if he can't see what I see." Eli took her hand. "Clara, I need you to understand something. I'm not marrying you despite anything, not despite your height or your strength or your independence. I'm marrying you because of those things, because of who you are. Even if it costs you your family." "He cost me that, with his conditions and his expectations and his inability to love me as I am." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Don't you see? We're the same. You and I, both of us too much ourselves for the worlds we were born into. But here, together, we fit." Clara thought of the cabin on the rise, the sewing room he was building her, the way his hand felt in hers. "We do fit. Then that's all that matters." They stood by the river as the sun set, two people who had chosen each other over easier paths. The ice was indeed thinning at the edges, spring warmth beginning its patient work. Soon the river would run free again, and Clara thought that was fitting. She'd come to Dustwill frozen by grief and rejection, but here by the water, with Eli's arms around her and their future taking shape, she felt the last of that ice cracking. "I love you," she said, the words still new enough to thrill. "I love you too," he replied, Amazon woman and all. She laughed, surprising them both. "Your father did have a way with words. Only thing he ever gave me worth keeping was stubbornness," Eli said. "And I'm going to use every bit of it to build us a good life. You'll see." Clara believed him, standing there in the gathering dark. She believed in all of it, in love, in choice, in the future they were carving out of this hard land. Let the bitter letters come. Let the gossips whisper. She had Eli. She had herself. She had a life worth living. It was more than enough. It was everything. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting to reveal brown earth and the first green shoots of hope. Clara threw herself into wedding preparations with the same determination she'd brought to survival, but at night, alone in her room above the bakery, doubts crept in like fog. She sat by the window, working on her wedding dress, a simple design in cream muslin that Martha had helped her plan. Each stitch felt like a promise, but promises could be broken. She'd seen it happen. Her own mother had died young, leaving promises unfulfilled. Her father had promised she'd always have a home, but illness had stolen that too. "You're thinking too loud," Martha said from the doorway. "Carrying tea? I can hear it from downstairs." Clara set down her needle. "What if I'm not meant for this marriage? I mean, being a wife?" Martha settled into the other chair, her round face thoughtful. "What makes you think you're not? I don't know how to be soft, delicate, the things men want." "Eli Carter doesn't want those things. He wants you." "But what if he changes his mind? What if after we're married, he realizes I'm too much, too tall, too strong, too—" Clara gestured helplessly at herself. Martha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Come with me." She led Clara down to her own rooms behind the bakery, to a bedroom Clara had never seen. Martha opened a trunk and pulled out a photograph, her wedding portrait. In it, she stood beside Ronald, young and hopeful, but even then the height difference was notable. Martha came barely to his shoulder. 23 years ago, Martha said softly. "I was terrified the night before our wedding. Not because I didn't love him, but because I did, because I knew I was difficult, opinionated, not the sweet little wife he probably imagined." She traced the photo with one finger. "But you know what? We figured it out, not perfectly, not without arguments and adjustments, but we built something real. It's different. You and Ronald are two imperfect people who chose each other anyway." Martha put the photo away. "Just like you and Eli." The next evening, Eli found Clara at their spot by the river. She'd sent word she needed to talk, and he'd come immediately, despite it being a busy time at the ranch. "Having second thoughts?" he asked gently, reading her mood with the ease of long acquaintance. "Not about you, never about you." Clara twisted her hands in her lap. "About me, whether I can be what you need." "What I need is you. Thought I'd made that clear. I can't cook much beyond basics. I'm better with a hammer than a soup ladle. I'll never be the kind of wife who sits quietly while you talk, who makes your home a peaceful haven." "Clara," he took her hands, stilling their nervous movement. "If I wanted a quiet wife, would I be marrying a woman who jumped in a frozen river, who faced down this whole town with her chin up, who works harder than any 3 people I know? But your home, our home, built with my hands for us both, with a sewing room because I know that's part of who you are, with a kitchen table strong enough to stand on because I figure you'll need to reach high shelves." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "I don't want a peaceful haven. I want a partner, someone to build with, argue with, make up with, live with." Clara felt tears threaten. "What if I disappoint you?" "What if I disappoint you?" he countered. "What if I work too late, smell like horse more often than soap, Forget to notice a new dress. What if I'm stubborn about the wrong things? Quiet when you need words. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissed each one. That's what marriage is. Isn't it taking the risk? Choosing each other anyway. When did you get so wise? About the time I fell in love with a woman who makes me want to be better than I am. They sat quietly as dusk gathered, hands linked between them. Finally, Clara spoke. I want our wedding night to be right, special, but I don't. That is, I know the basics, but... Eli colored slightly. We'll figure it out together. No rush, no expectations, just us. The women in town, some of them have told me things about duties and endurance, and... Clara shook her head. It all sounds rather grim. Then they married the wrong men. His voice was firm. Clara, I want you. Not just that way, though Lord knows I do, but all of you. Your laugh when Billy says something foolish. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating on a difficult seam. How you look in the morning sun when you're hanging laundry. He squeezed her hands. That's what I want to wake up to. The rest we'll learn together, and I promise you, it won't be grim. Clara felt heat bloom in her cheeks, but also something else, a loosening of the knot that had lived in her chest for days. I love you. I love you too, doubts and all. The day before the wedding. Clara was hemming her dress when a knock came at her door. Helen Jensen entered, carrying a box. Every bride needs something blue, she said, producing a pair of delicate blue garters. These were mine. I'd be honored if you'd wear them. Clara fingered the soft silk, overwhelmed. Mrs. Jensen, I couldn't. Helen, and yes, you can. The older woman sat, her elegant bearing making Clara's simple room seem finer. Clara, may I speak plainly? Of course. I know you have doubts. Every bride does. But I want to tell you something. My husband was considered quite the catch when we married. Handsome, wealthy, from a good family. I was lucky. Everyone said, but do you know what I've learned in 20 years of marriage? Clara shook her head. The catching doesn't matter. It's the keeping. It's the daily choice to see each other clearly and choose love anyway. Helen smiled. Eli sees you clearly. More importantly, you see him. That's rarer than you might think. After Helen left, Clara sat with the blue garters in her lap, thinking about choices and chances. Tomorrow she would walk into the church, the same one where she'd once taken bread from the charity basket, and marry Eli Carter. Not because she had to, not because she had no other options, but because she chose him, because he chose her. That night, she finished her dress and packed her few belongings. Tomorrow night, she would sleep in the cabin Eli had built. Their cabin, their home. Martha appeared one last time before bed. How are you feeling? Terrified, Clara admitted. But also ready. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Martha hugged her. Flower and warmth and steady friendship. You're going to be fine, both of you. Better than fine. Clara climbed into her narrow bed for the last time as Clara Miles. Tomorrow she would be Clara Carter, wife, partner, all the things she'd never thought she'd be. The doubts were still there, flickering like candle flames. But stronger than doubt was love. Love and choice and the promise of a shared life. Outside her window, the spring night was soft with possibility. Somewhere across town, Eli was probably lying awake too, thinking his own thoughts, wrestling his own doubts. Tomorrow they would stand together and make promises, not perfect promises, nothing in life was perfect, but real ones, grounded in who they truly were rather than who they thought they should be. No one promises their first night to someone unless they mean to keep all the promises that follow. Clara whispered to the darkness, remembering her mother's words from long ago. Choose carefully, my girl, but once you choose with your whole heart. She had chosen, despite the height difference, despite the gossip, despite the letter from Eli's father and the doubts that whispered in the dark. She had chosen. And tomorrow she would stand up in front of God and Dustwill and make that choice public. Clara Miles, too tall, too strong, too much of everything, had found someone who thought she was exactly enough. Tomorrow, she would walk into her new life with her chin up and her heart open, ready for whatever came next. The candle guttered and died, leaving her in darkness. But for the first time in months, the dark didn't frighten her. She wasn't alone anymore. Tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after, she would have Eli. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The wedding was simple. A small ceremony in the church with Martha as witness and Tom Beach standing up for Eli. Clara wore her cream muslin dress and Helen Jensen's blue garters. Eli wore his best shirt, the one she'd mended with extra care. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the silence was profound. Even Mrs. Abernathy held her tongue. After the vows, they rode to their cabin in Eli's wagon. Clara still in her wedding dress, her few possessions loaded in back. The spring afternoon was warm. Birds singing in the cottonwoods along the creek. Their creek, Clara thought. Their land, their life beginning. Eli carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing when he staggered slightly. "You're not heavy," he insisted, setting her down gently. "I'm just nervous." "You're nervous." Clara smoothed her dress with trembling hands. "I've been terrified since dawn." He caught her hands, stilled them. "We don't have to do anything tonight, just be together. That's enough." But standing there in the cabin he'd built for them, seeing the care in every joint and beam, the table and chairs he'd made, the bed with its new quilt, a wedding gift from the ranch hands, Clara felt her fear transform into something else. Want, need. The desire to truly belong to this man who'd chosen her against all logic. "I don't want to wait," she said softly. "I want to be your wife, completely." Eli's eyes darkened. "You're sure?" Instead of answering with words, Clara reached up and began unpinning her hair. It fell around her shoulders in waves, and she heard his breath catch. "I'm sure." They moved to the bedroom slowly, shyly. Clara had helped birth calves and foals, understood the mechanics of life, but this was different, tender and fumbling and achingly sweet. Eli was patient, gentle, checking constantly that she was all right. "I'm not fragile," she reminded him at one point, which made him laugh against her shoulder. "No," he agreed. "You're not. You're magnificent." Afterwards, they lay entwined in their new bed, skin cooling in the evening air. Clara traced patterns on Eli's chest, marveling at this new intimacy. She'd given him her first night, as the old phrase went. But more than that, she'd given him her trust, her future, herself. Did I? Eli seemed to be searching for words. "It was perfect," Clara said firmly. "We were perfect." "We'll get better with practice," he said, then blushed at his own boldness. Clara laughed, feeling wonderfully wicked. "I certainly hope so." They dozed, woke to make simple supper, went back to bed simply to hold each other. In the morning, Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the windows Eli had installed and the sound of him making coffee in the kitchen. She rose, wrapped herself in her robe, and padded out to find him. He turned at her approach, and his smile was radiant. "Morning, Mrs. Carter." "Morning, Mr. Carter." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "What's the plan for today?" "Thought we'd go to town. Let folks see we survived the wedding night." His eyes twinkled. "Unless you'd rather stay here." "Tempting, but I have orders to fill. Marriage doesn't stop the need for mended clothes." They dressed and rode to town together. Clara sitting properly beside him on the wagon seat this time. The looks they got were knowing but not unkind. Even Ronald Holloway managed a nod of acknowledgement. At the bakery, Martha hugged Clara fiercely. "You look happy." "I am," Clara said simply. "Good. That's all I need to know." Martha pressed a basket into her hands. Wedding breakfast. Don't argue. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Eli left early for the ranch. Clara worked on her mending now in her own sewing room with its good light and sturdy table. Evenings they spent together, learning each other in all the small ways marriage allows. How Eli liked his eggs. How Clara hummed when content. The way they fit together in sleep. Her back to his chest. His arm around her waist. Not everything was easy. They argued about money, Clara wanting to contribute her earnings to the household, Eli's pride making him resist. They disagreed about social obligations, Eli content to avoid town gatherings, Clara knowing they needed to be seen to be accepted. But they worked through each conflict, sometimes with raised voices, always with eventual understanding. 3 months after their wedding, Clara realized she'd missed her monthly time. Then again, Martha took one look at her pale face and dragged her to Doc Morrison, who confirmed what Clara already suspected. About 4 months along, I'd say. He announced cheerfully, "Everything seems normal. You're a strong, healthy woman. Mrs. Carter should do fine." Clara walked home in a daze. A baby. She and Eli had created a life. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She told him that evening, after supper. He went very still, coffee cup halfway to his lips. A baby. Due in winter, Doc thinks. The cup clattered to the table. Eli was around it in seconds, pulling her carefully into his arms. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." "You're happy?" "Happy." He pulled back to look at her. "Clara, there aren't words. Are you happy?" "Yes," she realized. "Scared, but yes." The pregnancy progressed normally. Clara worked until she couldn't bend over her sewing table anymore. The ranch hands competed to bring her treats and carry things for her. Helen Jensen organized the church women to make baby clothes. Even Mrs. Abernathy contributed a knitted blanket, though she made sure everyone knew it was only Christian duty. Eli was protective to the point of comedy, trying to keep Clara from lifting anything heavier than a teacup. She bore it with mostly good grace, understanding his fear. They'd built something precious together. The thought of losing it terrified them both. Winter came early that year. Clara was hanging wash in light snow when the first pain hit. She'd been having twinges all morning but had ignored them. This was different, deep, and demanding. "Eli," she called, but he was at the ranch, miles away. Another pain, stronger. Clara gripped the wash line, breathing through it. When it passed, she moved carefully toward the house. She needed Martha. She needed... Water gushed down her legs, and Clara understood with sudden clarity that this baby was coming now, ready or not. She made it inside just as another pain hit. When it eased, she grabbed the rifle from above the door and fired 3 shots, the emergency signal. Someone would hear. Someone would come. The pains were coming faster now. Clara made it to the bedroom, shucked off her wet skirts. She'd helped deliver enough animals to know the basics. But this was different. This was her body, her baby, and Eli wasn't here. "Please," she whispered to the empty room. "Please wait for your father." But babies keep their own schedules. By the time Martha burst through the door, followed closely by Mrs. Chen, Clara was deep in labor's grip. "Eli," she gasped between pains. "Tom's riding to fetch him," Martha soothed. "Now let's see where we are." The next hours blurred together. Pain and effort, Martha's steady encouragement, Mrs. Chen's quiet competence. Clara heard horses outside. Eli's voice raised in panic, Tom holding him back from bursting in. "Let the women work," she heard Tom say firmly. "You'll just be in the way." Another pain, overwhelming. Clara bore down, feeling her body stretch impossibly. Martha's voice urgent now. "That's it. Push, I can see the head." One more effort, reaching deep for strength she didn't know she had. Then pressure, release, and a thin wail that was the most beautiful sound Clara had ever heard. "A girl," Martha announced, laying the squalling infant on Clara's chest. "Perfect and healthy." Clara looked down at her daughter, red-faced, wrinkled, absolutely beautiful. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mama." The door burst open. Eli stood there, hat crushed in his hands, face white. "Clara, come meet your daughter," she said. He approached slowly, as if in a dream. When he saw the baby, his face crumpled. "She's so small." "She's perfect," Clara corrected. "Sit." He sank onto the bed beside them, one finger reaching out to touch the baby's fist. Immediately, tiny fingers wrapped around his... "Oh," he breathed. "Oh, Clara." "What should we call her?" "Rose," he said without hesitation. "For my mother, if that's all right." "Rose Carter." Clara tried it out. "It's beautiful." They sat together, their tiny family complete, as snow fell outside and their friends quietly took their leave. Later there would be challenges, sleepless nights, teething, all the fears and joys of parenthood. But right now, there was only this Clara and Eli and Rose, proof that love could build something from nothing. "Thank you," Eli whispered against Clara's hair. "For what?" "For jumping in that river, for saying yes, for this." He gestured at their daughter, their home, their life, for everything. Clara leaned into him, Rose peaceful between them. She'd come to Dustwell with nothing but pain and determination. Now she had a husband who loved her, a daughter to raise, a place in this community she'd earned through work and courage. "We did this together," she said, "all of it." "Together," he agreed. "Always." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their cabin in peaceful white. Inside, the fire crackled. Rose made tiny baby sounds. And Clara Carter, once too tall, too strong, too everything, was exactly where she belonged. She'd kept nothing back, given Eli all her nights and days and the spaces between, and he'd given the same in return. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. Every day, they chose each other. It was more than enough. It was everything. It was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale, whether you're listening while driving through the countryside, relaxing at home, or perhaps during your daily commute. Please share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know which part of Clara and Eli's journey touched your heart the most. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help this story reach more listeners who appreciate authentic tales from the American frontier. Until our next story, partners.